This week has been surprisingly busy, and I think once again that's for a lot of people in the world of podcasting as well as myself. I recorded 2 episodes of When There Was Fab, the first of a new occasional portion to this episode of Chronicles, where I'm joined by podcast experts to answer questions sent in by listeners, and an episode of Toppermost of the Poppermost. I spent a few days editing the Wednesday episode of Pods Like Us, which has been incredibly popular, and I've also posted up the PodBiz newsletter almost comfortably. Almost. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this is Pods Like Us Chronicles. On Wednesday, I recorded the first virtual meetup for NJ Belenky of PodBiz, Neil Veglio from PodKnows and Podmastery, and myself to answer a question sent in by a listener. There were so many technical issues with this recording, the first being a problem between Neil's Rodecaster setup and the Zencastr remote recording that I use. This necessitated moving on to NJ's remote recording on Riverside. Even then, there were still issues, and I myself in particular had problems. Hence why, at a point towards the end of here, there is an obvious one-shot of me in the video version of the talk that was from those recordings because of the local recordings that we get separately. But I've had to go from the image of all of us for the video version of this into the full version. Because yes, this Chronicles episode is going out as a video as well. Here is that talk for your edutainment. So myself, NJ Belenky and Neil Veglio have decided to get together to answer a question that somebody sent in one of these occasional chats that we will have based upon questions that are sent in by podcasters and friends of the shows that we all do. So Kevin Brown sent in the question asking about artwork, and it's an interesting topic artwork, because you think of it one way, but you don't realize the multiple ways that you could look at the subject of artwork. So he's saying, there's the approach, he calls it the Mercedes and the Ford approach. So he said the Mercedes is that you have the same artwork for every show and every episode, whereas the Ford approach is to have different artwork for each episode.
Right.
So
okay.
Where do we all stand on this, NJ?
All right, I'm in the hot seat first. I love that he called it the Ford approach. I'm guessing that's because Henry Ford invented the assembly line. So I would say it depends on the show, right? Are your episodes varied? Is it the same kind of episode, same kind of cadence, same kind of publishing schedule, same format? If so, what's going to be different about it? Are you going to have a different guest photo? Are you going to, change anything about the artwork based on the episode? I mean, I would say, like, for instance, for PodBiz, we changed, obviously, the logo of the company that the guest is from and the guest profile on the graphic. And that's both used within the feed and within socials. So that also helps promote the show. So I think that if it's an interview format show, every guest wants to see their face on the artwork. Let's be real. And you can create templates super easily with Canva where you just swap that out. So I don't think that's unrealistic. If it's a show, I want to say like stuff you missed in history class or something like that, where it's same hosts, same format, different topics, you may not want to change it. And it also, thirdly, tertiary, I think it has to do with budget, both monetarily and temporally. Do you have time to make a new graphic for every episode? When people ask me, how should I promote my podcast? which I do audience development outside of PodBiz and other things I'm known for. It's like, how long is a piece of string? You know, how much budget do you have? How many hours a week do you want to spend on this? Do you want to do your own newsletter? Do you want to do your own PR? Do you want to make all your own assets? Do you want to do all your own editing? You know, I think that when it comes to things like artwork, you want to have something really consistent and have all those brand guidelines pretty clear from the get-go. But in terms of the day-to-day actuality and production side of it, what do you have bandwidth for? What's going to look consistent with your brand? And what's going to get you the results both in listenership and audience development and on that social marketing side as well?
Neil?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I'm a bit confused by Kevin's claim that Mercedes have a different approach to Ford, because having looked at the Apple Podcasts, app for both of their brands' shows, and Mercedes actually do change episode to episode. Now, I don't know if Kevin last looked maybe 2 years ago.
Oh, was he talking about their podcast?
But I've got it here right now. It's Mercedes-Benz Audio Experience. And yeah, you got the typical show artwork of the silver arrows in the bottom, but like the nice, 5 o'clock golden hour sort of imagery with the car beautifully lit up. And then each episode, just a random picture of a car driving through the forest in one. Another one is a car parked outside a building. Ford is actually doing it slightly better, I would say, because what they've got is they've got the templated look. So it's the standard host. I think he's the CEO of Ford, Jim Farley. And then whoever Jim is stood next to changes based on who the guest is, which is obviously Canva, new person every single week. So beyond that, I think number one, Kevin might need to sort of look back at that and sort of like get a better case study to sort of go by and see what other people are doing, because I think it's really easy to go, oh, well, Mercedes are doing that and Ford are doing that. And, what's Mercedes doing? What they're doing is they're literally got the car, but then the model is the episodes, if you like. And that's the same with they don't use a Mercedes, CLK to advertise the entire brand. They use different models. And I think it's the same sort of idea, really. Your show is going to be your overall sound and look, if you're using video now, but each episode's going to have a different model. And beyond that, I think it really, like you said, NJ, it comes down to whether or not you want to spend the time. I mean, most people are not going to get the ROI on episode artwork unless they're sharing the content. It's all very well creating a masterpiece in Canva, and if nobody ever knows it exists, what's the point? You might as well just stuck your standard imagery in there. So for me, I'm not saying it's not worth the creative endeavor to do it. And I enjoy doing episodic artwork. I play around with AI and get really creative with it. And frankly, some of the AI stuff now that it can create is way better than paying somebody $50 on Fiverr, to create something, honestly, frankly, because it's all templated stuff anyway on there. So yeah, if you've got the time, do it. But I don't think it's going to grow your show. Genuinely, I don't, especially with a brand where, you're recognized by the show anyway, and anybody that's looking for your brand will find it. So I don't think changing your episode artwork is going to make a massive difference to the podcast, but it will help with, like you say, your social media sharing and your, brand assets.
Just really quickly, did I not do my homework? Is this about the Mercedes and Ford podcasts?
I thought it was about the cars.
I did too. I thought it was about their production strategies. So, right, like Henry Ford said, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And they invented just for all, manufacturing ever, the assembly line. So I thought maybe that's kind of what he meant. But it's interesting. I do have to say, looking at the Mercedes-Benz podcast, what you're talking about, the audio experiences, I wonder, as we're seeing more integration in terms of CarPlay, for anybody who's gone to a conference where there's that mix of both radio and podcasting folks, things like Radio Days and NAB, conferences that are more radio focused. I do wonder if car companies are going to start creating more content that is to be experienced in the specific vehicle, right? Or just kind of like for that experience, kind of like an experiential audio for the car. Super interesting, because obviously people are driving and listening to podcasts more often. It kind of reminds me of that, Buddy La Pasta that kind of went viral a while ago, where they made these playlists that were the length of the time you're supposed to cook the pasta for, right? So I do wonder if there's some sort of external audio experiential component here when we're talking about cars. But good to know that I'm not the only one here, Martin.
Definitely. I mean, going to something that I know Neil mentions quite a lot, which is about looking at where you are coming from financially and time-wise, and what you can afford to put into it. But so long as you've got a recognizable image or logo that goes with your show that is a brand and pushes that brand, I think that's the first thing and the main thing that's the most important is there. And, you know, like Neil said, if you've got the time to do those extra little bits like Neil does with Podmastery, where he puts in the title or something, or what the subject's about in each individual to put that, or yourself, NJ, with PodBiz, you put the guest.
John does that. My co-host and partner, John. Yeah, no, he is king of the castle. And when it comes to graphics, we're definitely a good team. But it is also something where, not to jump in, but I do also think if you're building a media brand, which we're seeing a lot of podcasters do, or even a brand that wants to have more of a media imprint, those graphics have to speak outside of the podcasting ecosystem sometimes.
So the easy answer is whichever fits you personally as a podcaster and whatever you want to push your podcast as, and the product, whatever product you want to put out is up to you and what you want to put into it. Because I think there's a danger in a lot of things with podcasting where you can go down a rabbit hole, and it's one of those things that it puts you into that podcasting nadir in a way where there's just so much in there and you're putting it onto yourself and adding these other jobs on to yourself, which just adds to the pressure, where you need to think about it as in what's comfortable to you as a creative.
Oh, bless you.
I managed to mute myself for that sneeze.
If I might jump in on your point there, Martin, about, what suits you. I always argue that there are a million different things that can become more important for your show than the million other things. And I think the artwork would definitely be on that list of, does it grow your show? Does it help you get not necessarily more listeners, because you might not need more listeners. You might have the right number of listeners, just the wrong type of listeners. So I think focus on reaching the people you're looking to reach first and foremost. And I don't think episode artwork is going to do that for you. I think what's going to do that for you is more thought about the content you're creating, maybe structurally as well as content editorially, and just focus on what people are hearing in those big bits of meat that jut out the side of your head. If that's enjoying the experience with your podcast, then the eyes are not really needing to be tickled by a bit of episodes imagery, because at the end of the day, they're hearing and they're seeing the final product and deciding whether or not they want to stick with that. Ultimately, your episode artwork, it might help them share it and feel proud of sharing it, or, makes it easy to identify. So you should check out that show. It's the one that's got the blue flower on the episode artwork or on the show artwork. Things like that can be useful, but they're not going to be the one thing that will make your show work over another.
I disagree.
Go on.
Go on, NJ.
I do have to say, podcasting is an audio format and we are visual creatures. And I have to say, before anyone ever listens to any part of your podcast, they're going to see that artwork. And if it looks
the main
homemade,
artwork.
Yeah, the main artwork.
Not necessarily the episode artwork, which isn't shown in that many places.
No. If they encounter it on social, if it's shared, if somebody sees like a headliner or something like that, they're going to see that episode artwork. So I do have to say, I do a lot of work with brands that are, doing stuff obviously on a larger scale, right? And that means that you have more budget and you have more people who can work on stuff. And that means you get more expertise across the board and you get to put a lot of labor into stuff. And we can put a lot of budget and science into artwork, and it really does make a difference. But it's also, if you're an independent podcaster, don't die on that hill. But if you have budget, call me.
So bringing it back to Kevin, who does, for instance, he does all music related podcasts. Kevin does. Mm-hmm. So he does Ultimate Catalogue Clash, he does the Tom Petty Project, and he does Seaside Pod Review, which is a podcast about the group Queen. And to their point of view, from my opinion, is that I think to them it helps if they've got a recognizable brand, such as yourselves with PodBiz and you with your show as well, with Podmastery and with B2B as well, Neil, where you've got that recognizable brand, but you sort of, if you've got the time, I think to them, to their show and what they're doing, it's helpful to have that individual artwork per episode if they've got the time, because let's say in the Queen review show that they do, they're doing a song from a specific album. If you've got that album artwork on there and your sort of brand somewhere on that episode, then you'll bring in the listeners, or more likely to, if they're just flicking around and thinking, oh, I do like that album by Queen, or I like that song. And then they're more likely to listen to it then than they are if you've got a generic, the same picture for every episode. I think anyway, I'm not really sure.
You want to go first, NJ?
Nope.
You're trying to coax out the tiger from the cage. I like it. Okay, I respect the hustle. But again, what I bring it down to is you got to get really granular with this and go, okay, so where are most people, finding their podcast episodes? Most of them are, it depends who you listen to. I am of the school that social media doesn't convert as well as the clips companies and the social media content marketing companies would like you to believe. I think PodKnows even did something about this about 3 or 4 years ago, where they were claiming that, social media traffic accounts for 1% or less of your actual future listener conversions. So given that, if you're then around, putting the outside of podcast apps argument to bed for a second and focusing on the fact that they're finding the content mostly by word of mouth or by in-app browsing, they're not going to see that episode artwork for a new Queen show unless they go into the show first, then go through the episode list and find that episode. Certainly not likely, unless they get featured on Apple Podcasts or in Spotify in a carousel, they're less likely for that artwork to be seen. So yeah, I totally buy into the whole, there's an episode about We Will Rock You. I definitely would want to check that out, but I'm not going to see the We Will Rock You. I'm going to see the main show artwork first and foremost. Then I've got to decide whether or not the show is for me to begin with before I even get into whether or not the episode is for me, if I haven't stumbled across this episode from outside the podcast app. So again, for me, it's like, is that added effort, if you're a small show, unless you've got people that are working on graphics for you, probably not going to lead to that many more We Will Rock You fans listening than would listen to the show overall, unless they've already been told that this episode exists through another avenue.
Yeah. I would say I agree, right? I think it depends on who your audience is and where they're coming from, specifically for a music-based podcast. How are people finding the show? I'm going to say it's probably word of mouth. It's probably a podcast review, publication. Podcasts on music have their own niche audiences. It's an entire niche, right? And it sounds like Kevin is more on the independent side, just from the short query that you've shared. So I would say, if I had to vote, right, I would say focus on making the show. And if you have great basic artwork, you don't necessarily need to change it. I would make sure that you have great artwork for the shows, right? I don't necessarily think you would need to change it. And I think like we said, it depends on the format of the show, right? A different guest every time, or different Queen song every time that you're going over. I haven't had a chance to listen, but I do think it's something where if you have really good artwork, that it's clear that this is a podcast on Queen, right? When you see the artwork, how much labor do you want to put into making an individual artwork for each episode? I think everybody here on the call can probably say there's not an entire economy based on Queen, the band. So I would probably give yourself a break there.
So what we're basically saying there is you've got all of this discussion that we've just had, and now you can go over and chew over all of that information and use it to decide what you're going to do, perhaps.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us, Martin.
Thanks for having us. And thank you to Kevin for the question.
Thanks, Kevin.
It's plenty more. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, wait. I'm going to hit stop, and then we all have to stay on to see if it uploaded.
Yeah.
So hold on.
Take two. So, as I had mentioned in the opening to this episode, this has been a busy week again in the world of podcasting in general and with my own podcasting journey. Sunday saw the previous Pod's Chronicles episode being released, which included the great discussion with Jamie East about the fabulous podcast Bad Blood, Life of a Cancer. A discussion that I was actually surprised to get no feedback from, especially with my editorial decision to keep the bad language in the conversation. Also on Sunday, Stephanie Fuccio placed on Substack a link to another Substack article from Melanie Goodman about the LinkedIn Substack flywheel. In the article, Melanie talks about the differences between LinkedIn and Substack, where LinkedIn requires you to be on there almost permanently in order to keep interest, whereas Substack is a more subdued affair, oftentimes covered by many with just a newsletter-style post per week or so. I would say that works elsewhere as well. I've been getting traction on Substack from posting the links on Facebook as well, so it's possibly something to look into more. A good promotional tactic is always a good thing. And if we find something that seems to work, then why not add that to your arsenal? Among the items mentioned by Gavin Gaddis in Monday's episode of The Download from Sounds Profitable, we found out about Spotify looking into something that can help creators with discovery, distribution, and monetization. He also told us about Raiders of the Lost podcast joining the TikTok podcasting network, so well done to them. Also on Monday, I had some music listening and research to do for the episode of When They Was Fab that was recorded later with Ed Chen. We recorded what will be split into 2 episodes about the writing sessions that took place between Paul McCartney and Elvis Costello, that were incredibly productive. I actually surprised Ed because during the day I had spoken with drummer Chris Whitten and the guitarist keyboard player Kevin Armstrong just in messaging, both of whom were present for these sessions. And they had taken part in recording the demos for those songs as well. I got some nice inside information about this period that was very lucrative for both McCartney and Costello. I also started a dialogue with Kevin that is going to lead to me recording a conversation with him about his history of working with people such as McCartney, Costello, David Bowie, Iggy Pop, and many others. A particular highlight for me will be the fact that I'll be able to talk to him about the Tin Machine era of David Bowie's career, because I remember getting their debut album upon release on the same day that the Queen album The Miracle came out, and I have memories of learning songs from the debut Tin Machine album. I actually learnt the songs Under the God, Amazing, Sacrifice Yourself, and Crack City. The latter being not that difficult to learn, actually. Among the news mentioned by James Cridland on Tuesday's episode of PodNews Daily, we were told about KidsPod, which is a great place to find podcasts that will keep your kids busy, entertained, and informed. On Tuesday, the 21st of July, Frank Braccioppi posted an article on Substack entitled Streamlined Solopreneur Podcast, Automating to Take Time Off, where he mentioned about the aforementioned Streamlined Solopreneur Podcast, teaching solo business owners how to automate certain tasks in order to let you get some downtime. Wednesday saw the inaugural get-together of myself, NJ Belenky, and Neil Veglio for what I tentatively called Podcasters Like Us, a name that will undoubtedly not stick. I don't particularly like it. It just needed something for the group meetup. As you will have seen earlier in this episode, or heard if you're listening on audio, we answered a question sent in by Kevin Brown, host of Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast, as well as the Tom Petty Project and Ultimate Catalogue Clash. I may have failed to get the latter show title right, either now, in the recording, or actually both times, to be honest. As a consequence of that recording, I made the decision to try and make a video version of this episode, which hopefully has worked so people are watching the video. Hello! Making my job around 100 times more difficult, such as this being take 2. I'm seeing what happens. To quote Jean-Luc Picard, let's see what's out there. If you have any questions, by the way, for the future of this occasional team-up, then please send them in to podslikeus@gmail.com. Wednesday also saw John McDermott of Calaroga Shark Media release his weekly newsletter, as well as a fabulous list of shows that he suggested to check out from his own listening. He spoke about his interest in what YouTube's forthcoming integrated visualization could mean, looking at the AI-based tools that are already available on the site to use. It makes for great reading. John also pointed out that in order to understand everything that was in the IAB report about podcasting, he had to put the multiple-page document through an AI to give him a paragraph or two of a description. John made me laugh when he mentioned, actually, that the new measures put into place by Substack are more substandard, because his AI-assisted newsletter was deemed 100% human by the Substack Popo. Get me, I said Popo. The episode of Conan O'Brien's show Conan O'Brien's show with Mick Jagger was a pointless exercise that I switched off after about 6 or so minutes. Same interview for everything. Left me uninterested, which is awful if they are using these promotional lanes to get new listeners. I personally have loved the Rolling Stones for decades, and even I didn't care for that interview. It was boring and samey. I was on the verge of swearing there and held myself back. Hopefully I'll have a cupcake for a job well done when this is over, because I believe that is what Louise is doing while I'm in here recording this, and also recording a punch-in for tonight's release episode of When There Was Fab. Some news came up. Woo! Incidentally, this goes with something that I did see in the week, where the legend that is Rick Beato, where he was talking on video about, even after the incredible deep dive conversation with the fabulous Billy Joel, we will probably not be seeing Paul McCartney, the Rolling Stones, or Dave Grohl on his channel on YouTube. A channel where, incidentally, the Billy Joel video had already been seen in less than 7 days at that point by more than 3 million viewers since it had been posted on YouTube. He says that the reason is because they share the same marketing agent / promoter, who I personally believe obviously only goes through old-fashioned promotional lines because of their background in the industry. Now, if they wanted to get new people interested that aren't brought into the fanship by either the parents or grandparents in some cases, then I would be getting them onto Rick's channel quick snappish. Imagine a deep dive into McCartney's or the Rolling Stones' more than 60-year back catalogue, with people who don't know much of their stuff, if any in fact, because, quite frankly, main radio stations that young people listening to, or sources where they're getting their music discovery from, do not feature these artists. So therefore, it's a whole avenue that's being missed by these people in promotions using old-fashioned lines of communication and promotion and marketing. In James Cridland's Radioland newsletter, I was saddened to see that a community radio station in Ireland was coming to an end. The truth is that I used to be an occasional brought-in so-called expert on the local radio station where I lived close by to discuss the local music scene. And, well, these stations offer something that the big corporates don't. Regional programming that tells you what you need to know about things going on where you live. Local voices, local businesses, and sometimes even people who you personally know as friends. Now, to turn this around to podcasting, that's where the regional tag comes in handy. Because if you want to make a show about, I don't know, the local businesses, groups and churches' attempts to raise money for good causes, for instance, then you could get that audience that won't be catered for when all of these local and community stations have gone by the wayside. Incidentally, there are actually a couple of podcasts by friends of mine that talk about the local music scene in Nottinghamshire. Left Line Podcast and Knots Rockcast. I actually found the link to James's Radioland newsletter in a link on Substack around 2 weeks after it had come out. The algorithms are dreadful on Substack, obviously. The following Radioland newsletter spoke about something that I think could be an opportunity for podcasters due to a deal that's been made to get a New Zealand radio station onto DAB+ in Australia. Possibly the first time that a foreign station has been distributed in other countries on the DAB services. Read the upcoming PodBiz newsletter this Tuesday for more thoughts from me about this, because people like Podcast Radio and Jerry Edwards could really do something there, I believe. On Thursday, the 23rd of July, Stephanie Fuccio gave us a fabulous article entitled 5 Podcast Discoverability Elements That Help Old Episodes Get Found. The 5 elements that Stephanie gives great advice about are podcast name, podcast description, episode titles, show notes, and transcripts. These are important because a lot of podcasts are now being discovered due to recommendations given by LLMs such as ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and other services. This is the information that these services use to base their recommendations on. Now, I need to look at my own show description, to be honest, because that show description is from 6 years ago when the show started, and it is old hat now. On Friday, Andrea Koskai released the Eurowaves newsletter that included the notice that the Substack account will indeed be staying, probably helped by the fact that it has been named number 15 in the international accounts on the service. That is huge. Well done to Andrea. That issue also included a wonderful interview with Vic Elizabeth Turnbull, the founder of MIC Media, who spoke about creating her own radio shows as a small child on a Fisher-Price tape recorder using her cuddly toys as guests and show staff. That was so cute and made me smile, and indeed, here I am smiling about it now. One of the items mentioned in Friday's newsletter edition of Into the Podverse from Tony Doe was the great news of Oge Elamillo using their podcast Africa and Everywhere to create jobs, with more than 7,000 people applying. Wow. Apologies for getting your name wrong, which I undoubtedly must have done. I am so sorry. There was also talk about Nigerian loan apps being under scrutiny, what the AMP considers to be a podcast growth in Uganda, yes, and so very much more. Sip of water. Saturday was a catch-up day for me, especially with the July month of podcasting prompts that I have paid no attention to since the 10th of July. Collaborations, promo swaps, social media flywheel, as mentioned in the earlier Stephanie Fuccio linked article. It was actually Melanie Goodwin that wrote that. I think that's her name. I've gone past that in the script. Making a good first impression and also creating a newsletter were among the prompts. There was also a fair bit of editing done, as well as writing for this coming Tuesday's issue of the PodBiz newsletter. Some of it was pilfered wholesale for this rundown, by the way. Incidentally, the artwork from Ethan Alexanian for Pods Like Us has now been delivered and has replaced the previous artwork. There was a hint of sadness in some ways because I liked the peas in a pod shaped microphone stand with headphones on, and the previous incarnation of the show on video had a nice animated introduction that had the peas dancing to the music that was going on and then suddenly jumping into the mic stand, ready for the show to start. The new artwork, though, is really good, I feel, in an uncomplicated way, and there was a fair amount of back and forth that resulted in something that is multi-purpose and can be utilised for the different sides to Pods Like Us. The main show, Chronicles, the PodBiz newsletter, and the return of the Podfiles blogs when they come back. The latter is a bit complicated now in a way, because this year a podcast called Podfiles has started up. That has nothing to do with the blog that I have been doing for about 4 or 5 years. Anyway, after the sign out, you will hear a trailer for the podcast Creatures of the Wind, created by one of the podcasters taking part in the July podcast prompt challenge, as mentioned earlier. So with that, I wish all of you podders the best. Pods Like Us is available anywhere that podcasts can be found, and all of the links to the social media and email are available on the opening page of themarvzone.org. The show is distributed and sponsored by RSS.com, and we thank them for their support. Please rate and review the show on the platform that you are listening or viewing the episode on. All feedback is gratefully received, as it helps to know if there is anything that needs to be looked at. Thank you for listening, and I hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us Chronicles.
I was living in New York on 9/11, so I was there a year later, and I was walking home from work. I stopped at the Quaker Meeting House. I just remember sitting there, and you could just hear and feel all the wind like whipping around in the meeting house as everyone just sat there just so quietly. It was just like... The next day, the wind was just completely gone.
It's trying to control something that is uncontrollable. You learn to respect it and you allow her to move you, but you have to be careful that she doesn't want to move you too much. It's a scary thing. It's the unknown.
One time a year or every year, there's a warm wind that comes down across traverses the mountain, so the warm wind kind of hits you.
I do not like the wind. It gets my hair too messy.
You see, the wind is unpredictable. You can try to grasp it, but it can't be tamed. It can't be held. You have to let it hold you.
Did you notice it's not windy right now? But when you said let's sit for a minute, the wind picked up?
The wind is love.
I can't explain that.
The wind is awe.
It hasn't been windy since we've been sitting here. Like, not at all.
But above all, the wind is change.
My future is like always. Wait, I don't know.
Whether you like it or not, we are all creatures of the wind.